Right, so quick feedbacks for the health, lifestyle, community, etc. Probably the 7 presentations I fell into 2 main categories, one of which is community social sharing and platform building to engage large groups of people, and not just in terms of trying to find revenue from advertising, but actually genuinely find platforms which are of use to specific groups of people that they are then willing to pay something for the privilege of using, as well as making them attractive to other content providers who basically providing a channel. So in that first category of the social, it's been a real learning experience for me today. I think Uday referred to somebody with grey hair earlier. Trying to understand the role of social media in my life is difficult enough, without trying to understand the variety of concepts of people exploiting this technology. I'm a bit of a telecoms network tangibly type of person, but we had a web platform for outdoor enthusiasts, publishing trial guides, but also helping people, wherever they are in the world, get advice on where they should be walking, build networks of interest with people. So Foursquare for walkers, I guess somebody would argue that's not what he's doing, but something roughly like that. Another very interesting social venture, joint venture around providing facilities and help for young people with cancer to give them a better quality of life, and then engaging all sorts of partners, corporate and individuals around who could actually provide services that are going to help, obviously a fairly critical part of our population. We then had an online online coaching company that's facing the challenge of many one-person consultants and coaching. How do you scale up from having one-to-one relationships and get that into more of a scaled environment? Some interesting thoughts there. And then we had Go Mad Technology, which was pitched as a gift to the local community in Leicester to start with. Community engagement, how do you engage 1 million people and help and assist them on many fronts. So really the theme we heard from the performing rights thing this morning, doing, sharing, I'm not sure about the ripping part of this, but an awful lot about what you do, sharing it because it's of value to other people. And then the second category was a bit more tangible technology related. So we had the idea about replacing inefficient pages inside hospitals with smartphone apps, basically, and getting that accepted with the NHS, and then all the information management and communication effectiveness and efficiency improvements you can gain from that. Gait focus, so ways of enabling people to understand how they're walking and moving, if they're suffering from strokes, Parkinson's, etc., without having to put sensors and straps and everything else on, and giving biofeedback so they can learn and self-correct and things like that, which is very interesting. And then lastly, a sensing, sort of a self-location system, mesh technology for helping people understand where they are relative to each other in either difficult to reach locations where GPS can't find it, or in health environments where it's good to know when people have fallen over and accidents may have happened and you need to dive in there with some critical care. I think we heard a bit about that from some school. So two main categories, and I'm just listing through here and presentations this morning, and I hope this is where you guys are getting the value today. Immediately you can see connections between what people were saying and what people were saying this morning, other people in the room, and clearly that's hopefully the value you're getting from this, because there are clearly many people out there that were in the same field or just feel just a little bit beyond that connection to be very valuable. Big messages coming out for me then, probably 4, and I'll say funding and get that one out of the way, because that really came up a lot. But I think scaling was one of them. One is to find relevant content to make these social platforms valuable to people, and then how do you bring that content on board? And then this balance between local and global. So scale global platforms, use people, either 1 million people in Leicester, Leicestershire or the outdoor enthusiast one anywhere on the globe, but providing very localised information as of use to you where you are at that moment. So a real balance there between the local and the global, which sounds like an immense challenge, but it's clearly part of what social media is about. So scaling and how you scale the marketing and the technology to satisfy that was clearly coming through. Partnerships as the second one, whether that's supplier partnerships, distributor partnerships, technology partnerships, just how to make everything most relevant and differentiate. So that's the second one. Expertise. Is the third non-funding one, and that's not necessarily in one case that was we specifically need CEO, putting CEOs around. We can try and work out who that was, but also mentoring and people who've been in a similar environment and can add expertise and help around this. Just seem to be some of the themes coming out. So while the presentation started with the product and technology, that's what we sort of asked for, it moved through context to a lot to this, how to scale and how to find routes to market. And one interesting comment from presenter towards the end is the speed between finding a lead and a contact in a market and actually getting revenue from them, which is clearly vital if customers are, as we all think, the best form of finance. Okay, so that's, I don't know whether anybody in the room would anything else to add on that session that we had. If not, that's
great, Simon. Thank you very much, Simon. Right, so Richard.
Yeah. I think some similar things. We had a broad spectrum of propositions from people who had really interesting ideas that hadn't even got to the point of thinking about how that was going to turn into business, through to presentations that were about a business proposition that needed specifically this much money to get to this next stage. We covered across that spectrum music, politics, TV and 3D video, and interestingly the depth of expertise around London, which is not irrelevant given its proximity. A lot of those ideas were related to existing offerings in the market, and some people made those connections clear, some made them less clear. I think there's the point that was made earlier about the competitive landscape and understanding the ecosystem within which some of this proposition sits came out strongly in some cases and less strongly in others, and that was a reflection of the relative maturity of the thought processes. So beyond going through each presentation individually, I think those are the dominant themes, and I believe the presentations are going to be provided up online anyway, so I won't repeat all of that, because they're going to be there to go again. I think we'll be there. That's probably the best thing to say.
Thank you very much. That's great. Okay, so what we're going to do is, Peter, can you come up here? So we have a panel discussion, and you can, yeah. And what I want to do is really open this up for people to ask questions and have more of an interactive sessions. So for each, yes, Peter. So each of the people on the panel, I'm going to ask them to give them 2 minutes each, and I'd like them to describe the one key thing that they think everybody else here needs to hear.
Okay.
Right?
Should I start?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I think a word on partnerships. I chair 3 startups. I've run a number of companies. They are not easy. I mean, first of all, you've got to choose them well. You've got to understand from both sides what people expect out of that partnership and define it up front. But moreover, you've got to manage them. I think too many people enter into too many partnerships in business without expectations well set, and then don't work hard at the partnership as it begins to grow. So I think my feedback, I think doing partnerships is a very good thing, but they tend to work less often than not, because it is a hard thing to do. So if you do go into partnership with another company, make absolutely sure you know what both sides are expecting, and make absolutely sure you both sides deliver on it. But otherwise, it's just a waste of time.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things actually. I wanted to pick up on one of the things that Peter said earlier actually, which I thought his presentation was a really good presentation, and I hope everyone's taking notes. I think I've been on sort of both sides of acquisitions. I mean, Getty Images has been acquired, and we've acquired lots of companies over the years. So I've done quite a lot of due diligence on businesses. And the company that bought Getty Images did 4 years worth of due diligence on Getty Images. Apparently they were following our progress of 4 years. So when Peter says that people are going to, you know, put the X-ray vision on you, that is absolutely what happens. And as a creative, if you ask me who is the most important person in our company, I'd say it was the CFO. So it is really important. But what the main thing I wanted to say was, I think it's really important to look at your team if you have a team. And Peter did make that point really strongly. To understand what your weaknesses are and do something about them, and get other people to give you advice over what your weaknesses are and do something about them, because they will trip you up, absolutely will trip you up if you don't do something about them. So you have to be very self-analytical, I think, and very hard on yourself in that way. And that's the thing I've seen most over the acquisitions that I've been involved in, is that is the strength of the team is really what makes things succeed or not.
That's great, thank you. Simon?
Could be a bit boring really, and just mention the customer as the focal point. You know, I think there is, in terms of the number of successful companies out there, the number that have done that based on some real insight into some untapped, unsatisfied customer need versus an amazing technological breakthrough, I would hypothesise the former is where the vast bulk of successful companies come from, with some obvious notable exceptions. But it's that insight into what might work better for consumers, business or retail, that generally separates, you know, a good or not so good business, and link back to what we're doing today. It's, you know, how do you engage with people as potential customers and learn from them, as opposed to them not necessarily being the customers are partners. How do you engage and use them at the earliest possible period of development in a company? It then links back is also then to the team point just mentioned, is that as from part of my role as an investor, as entrepreneurs, almost by definition, haven't done it before. And Peter was talking about trying to find a track record. Many entrepreneurs just have not run companies or been there before. So what you're trying to look for is individuals who clearly understand how the users and customers will use their concept, whether the concept is technological or not. And for me, you find somebody who really understands the space they want to operate in, and they know that better than anybody else. Something magical will happen as a result of that.
Okay. Thanks, Simon. Peter?
I'm going to ask for 1 and a bit points, because the bit that I want to say first of all is to underpin what Simon's just been talking about, customers. They are the most important person in your business. Without customers, without having a clear understanding of what they want and developing products to meet their needs, you haven't got a business. But I really must focus on money, because that's what I'm here to talk about today. Make sure you raise enough money. There are very few businesses that go bust because they've got too much money. Plan your approach. Don't just do this willy-nilly. Sit down and work out how much money you need, who you're going to go to, who are the right partners to work with, how you're going to get there, what deal works for you. Don't waste time. Lots of people you talk to in finance will talk and talk and talk. You need to get them on a railroad track and drive them towards a deal. Concentrate and work hard. This is a tough job, raising money. It really is a tough job. Make sure you really put all of that effort into the business plan. You develop the financials, you do it right. You don't skimp and hope to get away with it. Get advice. The thing with advice, if you get corporate finance advice, you'll have to pay for it. But it probably, I think, more than doubles your chances. I think you probably multiply by 4 times your chances of getting money if you've had somebody work with you. They'll probably want a minimum of £5,000–10,000 or 3% of what you're raising. So it's going to cost you. If that means the difference between life and death in the business, I promise you it was worth doing. And the last point is, you will need BMP. What's that? Bloody-minded persistence. Keep going over all the hurdles that come your way.
Thank you, Peter. Kevin?
Nigel.
Nice. It's been a long day now.
I'm going to slightly disagree with something was said earlier and then wholeheartedly agree with something else. I used to be an investment banker. I used to do due diligence. So I'm neither a lovey nor a techie. Clearly, I'm obviously a
Baddie.
I was going to say merchant banker, but like in London. So, as someone doing due diligence, I used to do my utmost to get past the CFO, to get to the real people in the business who really understood what was going on. Because if they understood what was going on with the business and could convince me as the baddie, then we could start to draw confidence and go out and raise equity from potential investors. So the message there is it's really about understanding what the business is about, knowing what the business model is, and all the things that have been said about competitive position, customers, not talking about the technology, but talking about the customer need and how whatever it is you're offering meets that customer need is critical. And then the thing that I would wholeheartedly agree with is get advice, whether that's from a business coach, whether it's from an IP specialist, whether it's from a designer, whether it's from a corporate finance specialist. It's absolutely the right thing to do, and it will pay dividends. Because if it's, say, 3% of nothing is, who cares? But 3% of a very large number doesn't matter, because you've captured your part of it, and if they've got 3% and you've got 15% left, that's really, really good. So think of it at the end and work backwards rather than from the beginning and work forwards.
Thank you, Dan. And I got it right. Richard.
The one thing that sticks in my mind is really the primacy of execution over the idea. The idea on its own has no value whatsoever unless it can be executed. And that's ideal on intellectual property as well. I think we're sitting in a city that's probably awash with intellectual property, and the issue is, can anybody actually take it and turn it into business and turn it into value? And that's all about execution.
Thank you, Richard. Shai?
Thank you. So some of what I wanted to say has been said, so I'm going to do two quick sound bites. One of them is that from the outside, the creative industries looks like it is a low barrier to entry for entrepreneurs, because you don't need factories, you don't need wet labs, and all that sort of infrastructure that sits around the Cambridge area thing. But actually listening to you guys today, I realize that actually the barriers to entry are quite high, because it's so ambiguous and uncertain. The models are changing so fast, and there are so many players, so many multiple layers of definition. So actually to try and, if you like, incubate entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship into this sector is actually one hell of a challenge. And some of the answers were in the room today. The second piece that's very clearly, I think another definition just been given to me to solve the problem is that you might have techies and lovies, but actually you need the baddie who gets it, who actually understands how to create conversations between the techies and the lovies enough that the business can be built. And I think I must get around to reading the biography now of the late Steve Jobs, because he's one of those rare people I think who actually understood how these different components work and build teams around that. And maybe there's something in that for us.
Thank you, Shai. Okay, so floor's open. Questions, points you'd like to make, or questions you'd like to ask? Your own time.
Question for Nigel.
Yeah, could you say who you are first?
I'm Arifa Khan. I run a company called Genius Incubator, which helps entrepreneurs raise capital. My question is about how government-funded grants or co-angel investment funds and stuff work, and how do we get access to those?
First of all, the Angel Co-Fund is administered by Capital for Enterprise, which is an arm's length part of the Department for Business Innovation and Skills, and that works through effectively doubling up the investment of angel syndicates. So the route into that is through the angel syndicate that is considering making an investment.
So does one apply after you've got the angel financing in place? Or?
No, as the angel syndicate is coming together to make an investment, they can apply to, they need to be effectively accredited by Capital for Enterprise as eligible for funding through the angel co-fund, and that will effectively double up their investment potential. Which is very helpful when we've heard that angels are looking to take their money forward through and not just do a little piece and then be replaced by venture capitalists. It's enabling them to do follow-on investments.
So the angel networks apply?
The angel syndicates, which are often put together by angel networks. And in terms of grants from the Technology Strategy Board, absolutely go to our website, innovateuk.org. We do competitions, and Frank, for example, has mentioned ones around convergence that we're doing in the creative industries and as part of our digital program. Those are typically grants for collaborative research and development. They're done effectively according to our time scale and our scope. So we set the challenge and look for innovation that will address that challenge and will lead to business growth. We also have the SMART program, which used to be called SMART way back when it was run by the regional development agencies, was renamed Grant for Research and Development, and since the demise of the RDAs is now run as a national program by the Technology Strategy Board, and that operates on the entrepreneur's timescale and according to the entrepreneur's scope in 3 areas around proof of market, proof of concept, and prototype or demonstrator. Those grants are for 50% or approximately 50% of the project cost, and we will require the person to have a really good application. About 1 in 10 of the applications for SMART Awards are currently successful, and the entrepreneur needs to have the funding for their 50%. We won't just give money away into a black hole.
Do you have any specifications on what industries, what kind of technologies?
For SMART, it's wide open, just has to be research and development, and for our main programs, those cover a wide variety of industries.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thanks to the sales team.
Hi, John Marshall from UK Trade and Investment. I'm responsible for digital media in this region. That was a fascinating event, so thank you very much for that. I think the thing that struck me most was how, and I would say this, but how little people are taking an international perspective on a lot of their activities. And there's it's understandable, I suppose, people are trying to get things away in the market they understand most and so on. But it is important to be cautious. I mean, there are companies all around Europe whose job it is to see what's working elsewhere and to replicate it and then sell it further down the line, particularly in Germany. So a lot of the companies pitching today were born global, so they should factor that into to the activity. And UK Trade Investment can help with that with small amounts of money. But I also want to raise a question about a debate that was beginning to get going around investment, about venture capital versus government support and so on. First thing to say on that is that if you can avoid any engagement with government, then avoid it like the plague, because it will drive you crazy. And that applies to the EU media program as well, although there's money there. The other aspect is that there seems to be a view, or there used to be a view, that if you couldn't get money from VCs, then you should get it from the government. Now, what that's saying basically is that government should accept more risk than VCs are going to accept, which doesn't really make sense to me at all. And I think the point about VCs is, unless there's market failure, which I don't think there is probably at the moment, unless there's market failure, then the job of the entrepreneur is to persuade the VC that their risk is as low as possible. And the very good advice that we've all had on how to do that, I think, is very well spoken. So thanks.
That's great. Do you have a specific question, or just that was the observation, really?
Well, that is that observation, really, that the government isn't an alternative to the market.
Right. Other questions? Yeah.
Can I please ask Nigel, how does this angel thing work? The angels, you talk to the angels and they say, okay, we'll give you £100,000 for 10% of your company. the angel network then applies to government to be accredited. Does that mean the angel network then only needs to give you £50,000 for 10% of your company because the government gives them the other 10%, or how does it physically
It gives the
operate?
opportunity for it. I would say start with how much does your business need, and if the business needs 200,000, then 100,000 will come from the angel syndicate, and 100,000 will come from the angel co-fund.
And is the co-fund looking for a similar amount of equity?
Absolutely, they invest on exactly the same terms.
Right, so you start off with the overall amount. The
Yeah.
angel network says we're not rich enough to do that,
Yeah.
but with government funding we may be able to do it. And is there any government vetting of each individual deal, or do they become accredited as a supplier of the funding under this scheme and make their own decisions?
They effectively become an accredited supplier through Capital for Enterprise, but Capital for Enterprise does have an investment committee which will have the final say on whether the angel co-fund will co-invest with that angel syndicate or not. So they're not going to do bad deals, they want to do good deals with people that they know.
So can I just clarify that? What you're really saying is there's a syndicate of angels,
Yep.
and now we're talking about enlarging the syndicate by
Yep.
adding a partner, which is the finance arm that you just described,
The co-fund.
the co-fund, who will also make the decision. So they'll do their DD as appropriate or whatever.
They should be able to place some reliance upon the due
So it's-
diligence
okay.
done right. It's very similar to the scheme that's been operating for some time in Scotland with the Scottish Investment Bank.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with that. My question is simply, does this make the deal a longer process?
It shouldn't do.
Right.
It will a bit, obviously, but it shouldn't make it material.
So yes is the answer.
Yeah.
A little,
Thank you.
inevitably, but for double the money, that's probably something I might live with.
All right.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
Can I ask a question of the panel in respect to the kind of creativity that's emerging in this country? And we've talked a lot about the kind of the infrastructure, where we're going, but each of you must have in your own minds some sort of idea about where we should be going, where the real big opportunities might lie. Thoughts?
Do you want to start that, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the frustrations I have is I think the UK and Europe are as creative as the US, if not more so, particularly around television, particularly around media, and you know, we've got to get an environment where that creativity drives value, long-term value, and we're not there yet. I don't think. You know, I was looking at the amount of help that you get out, you know, in the valley. And the people go out there just because the environment is more stimulating. I don't know if you listened to Radio 4 this morning, but this ship that's going to be moored 12 miles off the coast to get non-US residents innovating within Silicon Valley. They bought a ship that they're going to put 12 miles off the coast, and they don't need a green
it's an
card.
entrepreneurship.
The entrepreneurship. Very good. But you know, what an indictment! If you are a European or a UK technologist and you have to live in a ship 12 miles off the coast of Silicon Valley to create value, then we've got a problem. So I don't. You know, my observation is I see as much good innovation here as I see in the US. I spend a lot of time in the US. What I don't see though is the way of taking that innovation through all the way to realisation, both to exit, the right people are buying, private equity is buying, but corporates aren't particularly buying in Europe. So it's the exits to the bottom. We've got to make sure that this is the hub again, and I think we've got the brains to make it the hub.
Yeah, actually, I'm afraid I want to make 2 points. I'll make them quite quickly. Firstly, I think we fail in teaching entrepreneurship at the most crucial stage of life, which is when we have with our kids. Our 6-year-old kids are the most entrepreneurial people in the world. By the time they've left school at 18, we've beaten it out of them. And we then have to try and teach them again how to be entrepreneurial, how to give them the confidence that they can come up and do things themselves. So what should we be encouraging people to do? I think we need to make them think not just about their specific idea, but we need to give them the ambition to think about big markets. So one of the things I do is teaching here at the university with young people is to get them to think, as well as having their own ideas, just sit down and write out on a whiteboard the 10, 20 big market opportunities that you know are going to happen. And I keep a list of them in my sort of day book, because people are always saying, oh, I can't think of anything to do. And actually, there are hundreds of things to do, and a great thing to do is to say, where is a big dynamic market that's happening now, and then use that to drive your creative powers. And that makes people think big, and that will help whether it's in technology, creative industries, whatever it is.
Anybody else on that?
Yeah, I suppose, my thinking is there is a lot of creativity around the internet now. It's very cool, I've got kids that are teenagers, and there's a lot of thinking and a lot of playing with the internet. And I agree with Andrew, there's a lot of creativity in the UK and Europe. I think it is true in the States that they're better at sort of bringing that together, whether that's in events or in conferences. I mean, one thing that we talked about recently was having a sort of a South by Southwest event here in the UK that could bring those kind of people together. And I think that is something that's slightly missing here in the UK. So,
any other points from the panel?
My only point would be that the rate in Andrew's chart of devices in the home just reminds you of how technology is advancing most quickly in the consumer space, that the children, teenagers are experiencing things way beyond what we experience. And when they get into the workplace and when they become customers, there's going to be expectations of how they interact with the world, which is maybe companies are going to struggle to do cost effectively. So I've got no idea what this means or what kind of companies would succeed, but there is something about gaming or the virtual environments and the experience that people get they're going to absolutely have to have in the workplace, unless they're not going to be engaged either with their employers or as customers. Question, really?
I would encourage the creative industries to think about solving big problems, because where there are big problems, there is money to be made. And I'd like to echo the gentleman's point there from UKTI. These need to be on a global basis. If you look on a global basis, the two big problems that need solving is healthcare and education. The lady who was here earlier from India, there was going to the Open University, which is trying to work on a contract to educate 1 million school teachers in India. And they've already started issuing out tablets to teachers and things. I don't mean aspirin, I mean those little. So just being clear in this community that I've seen. So I think your capabilities, technical creative capabilities to educate people around the world. Look what happened with the Arab Spring. There's big issues around the world that need solving. 100 million jobs in the next 10 years. They're all knocking on the doors across the Mediterranean. Those are big issues. We might watch movies about them later, but we ought to solve the problems beforehand.
I was going to say, in the gaming world, Electronic Arts used to invite young children from 4th, 5th, 6th grades to come in groups and try out their games and critique them. And it's just a very small way of really engaging young people.
Yeah.
I think just touching on again about the young people, I think that maybe the youngest person here. I'll say my thing. I think kind of like I've been lied to my whole life. Go through education, go to university, or get yourself a graduate job. And my generation came out and there weren't any jobs. And I've got hundreds of my friends 2 years after going to university still sat on the sofa not doing anything, and they weren't taught that entrepreneurial flair. Get off your arse and do something. Luckily, I came out and kind of kickstarted myself while I was at university. But yeah, it's a changing environment. It's starting to change, but unless the education system changes, then we're going to have that generation of unemployed people who don't know what to do, and or go into businesses that don't allow them that sort of creative flexibility. So, for example, I did an internship for Northern Rail in York, and there were guys who were going out and have a 5-minute fag break, which was basically 5 minutes not working. I didn't smoke, and I was like, well, can't I go 5 minutes on Facebook? So the computer system won't let you log into Facebook. And I was like, well, I don't want to be engaged with your company then, So it's just, as a young person, it's very eye-opening seeing all this and doing what I do as well.
So thank you. So there's a kind of final observation that I want to make, because we said we'd finish at 5. We're running 2 minutes over. For me, one of the key things that's coming through all this dialogue today is, in a sense, the difficulty of actually having this dialogue and curating this dialogue. When you think, we had a format and a program that Frank and I thought of, which we said we'd have presentations from people who had a lot of experience talking. We can have SMEs, and if there's one thing that I'd really like to do is to say we want to ensure that this dialogue continues. This is not just seen as an event that you went to, and I actually wrote some notes earlier on which we didn't quite reach everybody. I was trying to say, when you come to the event, the most important thing you need to do is to come and network and talk to people, exchange ideas, so you can continue a dialogue. Because you look at UMAT, the ability to talk to people with lots of experience, just the fact that you can actually have the dialogue, for all the unemployed young graduates, giving them the courage and the energy to say, don't look for a job, make your own job, create your own business. There's that energy. And so what we're going to do is put all this content up from this day online. And what we really want to do is to try and create a mechanism for this dialogue to continue. So that if every one of you has a dialogue with 10 other people, then we're getting this amplification effect. If it just remains a closed thing, then we won't have been as successful as we want to be. So I'm going to encourage you, you'll get an email with a summary, go on there, communicate, put ideas, thoughts up, but if the only thing you do as a result of being here today is go and have another 10 dialogues with people to discuss big opportunities where you can take some of your technology ideas to solve big problems, then it'll have been worthwhile. So I've got to say thank you to all the panelists, and thank you very much. We'll acknowledge them in the usual customary way.